Good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming. Welcome to the 2022 State of the City. It's exciting. Give it up. Excited to see all of you here in person, and welcome to everybody watching online. Again, my name is Joda Tongnapnua. I am Mayor Kelly's Chief of Staff, and I'm very happy to be joined by my colleague and friend, Jermaine Freeman, who serves as the mayor's senior advisor to economic opportunity, which means you cover everything from jobs, workforce development, skill building. Am I missing anything? Arts, culture, entrepreneurship.
That's about it.
The one and the only, Jermaine Freeman. We've known each other quite a while, right?
Yes.
Like 10 years?
10 years.
And it's kind of crazy that we're sitting here on this stage right now.
Yeah, but it's a privilege to be able to serve the Chattanoogans.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we both work for the city of Chattanooga, like we said, and we're here to kind of walk through the One Chattanooga strategy that many of you have heard about. Many people in the audience have actually had an opportunity to have a hand in helping create. But I want to start off, before we get into that, telling you a little bit about the two of ourselves, so that way, as we're having a conversation, you can kind of understand a little bit more about where we're coming from. But again, my name is Joda, and I grew up here in Chattanooga. My parents moved here from California when I was very young, and I watched them work their way into the middle class. My father immigrated from Thailand when he was just a young child, and my mom's family is from Italy, so I have very good Thanksgiving dinners. But also, I watched them really struggle to get up the economic ladder, and in a lot of ways, they succeeded and are thriving now. But I watched a lot of my neighbors, or the parents of the kids I went to school with, really struggle to make it, and in many cases they fell behind, even though they were working just as hard. And so for me, public service was an opportunity to understand how we can close those economic opportunity gaps, which is why I'm so proud to work for Mayor Kelly's administration, and why I'm so proud to be able to do this work. What about you, Jermaine?
Yeah, so I'm also from here. I was born and raised here. I had the privilege of going to Chattanooga School for the Arts and Sciences for high school. Did an undergrad at Morehouse and got my MBA from UTC down the road. But like you, I watched my parents also really struggle to work their way into the middle class as I was a child, as me and my brother were growing up. My mom is a 40-year veteran of the school system. She taught kindergarten for 40 years. My dad spent his entire career working in retail. My mom has the most education of anyone in our family. She went and pursued her specialist in education degree, which is in the education world above a master's degree but below a PhD. And they were the ones who really impressed to me and my brother the need for us to pursue education and to use education as a way to get into the middle class. So, yeah, my dad grew up in Alton Park. My mom grew up in Brooklyn. So the area that is now where the Brooklyn Nets play used to be the Fort Greene housing projects, which is where she grew up. So like you, we've come through some times.
Yeah. And I think that's just important context for you all to understand as we talk about the One Chattanooga strategy, because we feel very passionately about it, and I hope you'll see that as we move through. So as we progress through this presentation, I kind of want to start off and talk a little bit about what this plan is and what this plan isn't. The One Chattanooga strategy is really a vision document, and it's really where the mayor laid out his vision and challenged us as his staff and team to not only set a aspirational goal for Chattanooga, but to also get input from our community partners, from neighborhood associations, from our city council, and it really was a focus on collaboration and partnership. What it was not meant to be was an edict from City Hall or a plan to replace all other plans. In fact, I think we drew a lot of inspiration from the fact that there was such an intense culture of collaboration and planning and visioning in this community, from Vision 2000 to Velocity 2040 to Chattanooga Dreams. There have been a lot of really amazing vision work that has helped guide our community. And what's really funny is that when we finished the first draft of this plan and we got into a place where Mayor Kelly was excited about the content, I don't know, Jermaine, you've been around the political process before and for a while. I've seen a little bit of it. What's the first instinct whenever you finish a big vision document like that?
Well, typically what happens is that your elected official goes out and says, I got my vision document, here we go, and it's off to the races. But Mayor Kelly took the approach where he was going to say, hey, here's what we've got so far, here's what we've heard from the community, now let's go out and talk to the community more and collaborate even more, which is the unique nature of this plan.
Yeah, and so, what's really interesting is that the first opportunity to talk about this, Mayor Kelly didn't say, here's my vision, get on board, but rather he handed them a Sharpie and said, mark it up, help make it better. And so we've spent the last several months really learning from our community partners, hearing their priorities, and refining the plan. And so the version that you're seeing today is not the final version. In fact, I'll say it's not ever going to be complete. We're always going to be constantly refining it with input from all of you. But we are in a place now where we feel comfortable about the amount of community input we've received and that it reflects an aspirational vision for the future. And I kind of want to talk about why it's called the One Chattanooga Plan. And I think it acknowledges bluntly an aspirational objective, but also the reality that we are not currently living in One Chattanooga. We currently have two fundamentally different lived experiences in our community. And we've touched on some of the other visioning work that has already happened in our community, and I think it's important to celebrate the wins that came from those. We've all heard the Walter Cronkite bit and the stuff that we tell all of our friends when they come into Chattanooga. It's the economic development story, right? A turnaround city. And it's true. We absolutely did, and not we on the stage, but we as a community, many of you in the audience, a really dedicated group of Chattanoogans turned a declining city around. And that's something incredible and worth celebrating. And in that way, we had the foresight to move forward. But in that process, a lot of Chattanoogans were left behind.
Yeah, we still have incredible challenges. I mean, when you look at the fact that statistically Chattanooga is ranked as one of the roughest places for someone who is poor to grow up, to be able to climb out of poverty. If you look at the disparities between health outcomes between our African American population and our white population, African Americans are 4 times as likely to die of hypertension or renal disease, which is kidney disease, which is oftentimes attributed to complications of diabetes. And so knowing that we have those discrepancies and those huge inequities in our community, we have to be mindful of the fact that we don't have a one Chattanooga yet, but that's the vision that Mayor Kelly is striving for.
That's right. And, we have to be honest, and this plan sort of names the hard truth that when we look at these disparities, it's impossible to ignore the factor of race in those disparities. When we look at some research from the national economist that had been covered in the New York Times, he's at Harvard and was previously, I believe, at Princeton, there is a $13,000 annual difference between the later life incomes of white and black children who started in poverty and then later grow up. Their incomes are different by about $13,000. When we isolate the factors that create that difference, the only thing we can find is the color of their skin. And that should trouble us deeply. Chattanooga is in the bottom 9%, and Jermaine touched on this, is one of the worst places in America to grow up poor. And that really just means it's tough here to climb the income ladder, even tougher than our surrounding counties. And so whenever we talk about the challenge, we have to name the problem. And actually that gets into one of the other core pieces of this plan is that we start with values. And Jermaine, I'll let you jump in and kind of highlight a few.
Yeah, so there are several values that are up here, and all of these values and principles were principles that Mayor Kelly and our team found to be really important in terms of how we structured the One Chattanooga plan and then the values that we wanted to make sure were espoused through the plan. But I'll just touch on a couple. So equity has been a really driving value for this administration and for Mayor Kelly. Equity, of course, is not the same thing as equality. It's understanding and recognizing that we don't all start off with the same resources. We don't all start from the same places. And understanding that we will all start from, some of us are starting from behind. And so one of the things that Mayor Kelly has done in this first year is to create the Chief Equity Officer position. We brought on Tamara Stewart, who has been a wonderful addition to the team, and we've also created the new Department of Equity and Community Engagement. And so this is a way for us to be thinking about equity very deliberately and to make sure that we're pursuing equity at all times in everything that we do. You want to talk a little bit about justice over charity? Because I know that's one of the principles that jumps out to you.
Yeah, I think that it's a poetic way of saying that we are going to focus on system solutions over just a box of Band-Aids. Not exclusively saying that we are turning away from Band-Aids. When somebody's cut and bleeding, you really want to apply a Band-Aid. But at the same time, making sure that we're focusing on the long-term solutions to our challenges. And that really shows up in something that we're deliberating on right now. The American Rescue Plan brought some state and local relief funds to the city of Chattanooga, a once-in-a-generation opportunity of $38 million to invest back into our community. And when we look at the opportunity with those dollars, we realize that we got $290 million worth of requests into the city of Chattanooga. So we have some very tough choices to make. And whenever we think about how we're going to prioritize this, we are going to prioritize, and Mayor Kelly's been very clear, we are going to prioritize the solutions that have an impact on those challenges in the long term. And so you'll be hearing more about that as we proceed through that process.
Yeah, and then one of the other principles that jumps out to me is the concept of respect. And being able to meet people where they are, one of the things that Mayor Kelly has always told us is, and that we hear on a regular basis, is you got to be able to understand where people are and to respond to their needs at the time, because if we can't help them with the small things, how are they going to trust us with the big things? Yeah. And so that's one that's really been really resonated with me.
Yeah. So we have the values, and we've already talked about the why, the challenge that animates the One Chattanooga vision, recognizing that we currently have two Chattanoogas. But this plan also lays out 7 big goals. And we're going to talk a little bit about how these goals show up in the work that the city and the mayor is doing, and how they might guide our work in the future. So I'll start with the path that or the goal that Mayor Kelly believes is potentially one of the most important things we can do as a community, which is to create a path to universal early learning. I'll just highlight that we, in our first year in office, Mayor Kelly elevated the Office of Early Learning, which was started under the Burke administration, and really elevated it to the Department of Early Learning to continue that great work. And it's currently being led by Caritza Mosley-Jones, a member of our school board and a fantastic educational leader in our community. We are really excited to make sure that our community is investment ready. We know there's a lot of federal dollars that potentially could come down and totally transform the pathway for kids to get the education they need, that we know in those early years will have a tremendous impact on the rest of their lives. And the next big goal is specific. It is to catalyze the economic vitality in the Black community.
Yeah, and it's important to understand why this slide is specifically focused on the African American community. Statistically, African Americans make up the largest racial minority of the city of Chattanooga. We are roughly 30% of the population of the city of Chattanooga, and historically, African American communities have experienced and seen tremendous amount of disinvestment. And so, as we think about how we are going to really sort of catalyze and really sort of reshape and strengthen the African American middle class and the economic vitality within the African American community, we want to make sure that we're focused on things like entrepreneurship, increasing homeownership rates, and then making sure that that small businesses that are started and created by African Americans have an opportunity to really do business with the city. One of the things that Mayor Kelly did this year was created the new Director of Supplier Diversity, which can certainly help African American businesses really start to take advantage of contracts and learn more about the contracting and procurement process with the city of Chattanooga. But these are going to be things that are going to be important. This is something that is going to be important to Mayor Kelly, and it doesn't mean that we're doing this at the exclusion of other racial minorities. Right. It just means that we understand, and Mayor Kelly recognizes that historically, African Americans have been a tremendous part of the city's success and growth.
That's right. And, I think one of the exciting things about Mayor Kelly's background as an entrepreneur is there is going to be an intentional focus on entrepreneurship as a pathway to wealth creation in our community, and I think that's really exciting.
That's right.
Affordable housing has been one of the most talked about topics in our community, and this is something that you and I think about and talk about and work on every day, as do many people in our community. Sandra Gober is on your team and is probably the wizard of and most knowledgeable person on federal dollars around housing. It's a complicated issue.
Right.
And, one of the things that's worth pointing out is the way we define affordability is reflected around some of the federal standards, which is that folks shouldn't pay more than 30% of their income on housing costs. But unfortunately, here in Chattanooga, almost 40% of renters do. And that creates all sorts of knock-on economic effects, which is why Mayor Kelly's made this a clear priority. And he ties the issue of affordable housing to also this question of workforce development, making sure that people are building the skills to be able to pay that median rent that is prevailing in our community. But earlier this year, Mayor Kelly announced a $100 million effort to invest in affordable housing, where we have announced that we are going to put $33 million in this fiscal year's budget. In that first year, over a 5-year period, we'll organize that $100 million with the help of our partners in philanthropy and local banking, our local businesses, to create thousands of units of affordable housing and to also preserve naturally occurring affordable housing in our neighborhoods.
Yeah, and it's important to understand that the creation of affordable housing is expensive. Yeah. And so, that's why Mayor Kelly is committed to dedicating surplus revenue of $33 million in the upcoming fiscal year budget to address that. As we think about affordable housing challenges, we're not looking at necessarily one sort of targeted AMI group. We want to look at housing solutions and housing variety across the board, from 0% of area median income to 120% of area median income, so that we can make sure that we are providing a variety of housing solutions, because it is the belief of Mayor Kelly and our belief that the creation of more housing supply in the aggregate and the creation of a greater variety of housing stock can help us to create more supply and to put downward pressure on housing prices.
That's right.
But that means that we're also going to be pushing for housing for seniors, pushing for housing for the disabled, and then also pushing for solutions to address some of our homeless challenges as well.
That's right. So when we talk about affordable housing, we're talking about creating housing that is affordable for folks all across the income scale, of families of all sizes. We know that it's not just studio apartments that are in demand, but homes with 2 or 3 bedrooms. That's really important for our community. So the next major goal is to make sure that we're investing in effective and quality local infrastructure and public transit. I want to brag for a little bit on Mayor Kelly. You all remember the pothole ad that was on TV, and Mayor Kelly certainly hasn't forgotten about it. And that's why in the last year we paved more road miles or lane miles of road than any single year in recent history in Chattanooga. And that's really exciting. That's possible thanks to a $10 million a year commitment, thanks to the partnership with our partners at City Council. That has really transformed the environment that we have in filling potholes, getting roads paved. But infrastructure isn't just roads, bridges, and airports. Our city has seen huge investments in broadband, which we should continue to leverage. But we're also one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And when we look at all of the mayor says this all the time. He'll say, you want to look at what is our competitive advantages as a community. Look out the window. It's all that green stuff you see outside, which is why we consider our parks, our trails, and our greenways as an essential infrastructure platform for our community.
Yeah, and so when we talk about competitive advantages, that's something that on the economic development side, we certainly use to market our community. So most of you don't know this, but this past weekend, me and my colleague Charles Wood from the Chattanooga Area Chamber of Commerce, we are recruiting a company right now as we speak from the West Coast. And they were here this past weekend, and they biked all over the city. They also biked our trails on Raccoon Mountain. They biked the Riverwalk. They biked the South Chickamauga Greenway. I think the new stretch of it may be open or close to opening. And all they could do was talk about and rave about the connectivity that Chattanooga has to offer. And so as we go forward, I think Mayor Kelly is spot on when he talks about the need to use and to think about infrastructure also in terms of those alternate forms of multimodal pathways that we have, because it is a competitive advantage for our community.
That's great. So this is your bailiwick, Jermaine. So I'm curious, whenever companies that you talk to all the time come to Chattanooga or are interested in Chattanooga, what are they asking you about? What are their concerns?
Yeah, so the big concern is talent. So the mayor and I actually just left a meeting right before we came over, where the primary theme that we heard from this employer was the need for talent. And so talent, what does that mean for us? For Mayor Kelly, that means that we are doing everything that we can to create pathways for adults to move into livable wage jobs. And so that means not only do we create opportunities for people to go back and get the education or the credential that they need, but it also means making sure that they have the social service supports to be able to support them on that path so that they can be successful. In last year's budget, Mayor Kelly, and with the help of the City Council, made a significant commitment to the Building and Construction Workforce Center over in East Chattanooga. That model of education institution, which is done in partnership with Chattanooga State and with other community partners, as well as the county and state, that's the type of model that can help people move back into the workforce and get a livable wage job because they are able to go back and get the skills that they need. And if they have the right wraparound services to support them, whether it's help with child care or help with transportation, then they can be successful over the long term. So that kudos to Mayor Kelly. The city, under Mayor Kelly's leadership, not only made an investment with the help of the City Council and the Building and Construction Workforce Center, we also donated property to facilitate the construction of the center as well. And so these are all things that we really care about on the workforce side and things that Mayor Kelly is going to be pushing.
And, for the future of our city and to be able to attract living wage jobs, there couldn't be a more important priority because, again, when we talk about affordable housing, when we talk about early childhood education, when we talk about transit, all of those priorities are factors and prerequisites for getting the good living wage jobs that ultimately sustain this economy and sustain families all across our city. So that's really exciting. This one is feels obvious, probably more obvious than I think we even realized when we were putting it into the plan. But COVID-19 obviously reoriented all of our priorities all across the country, all across the world. And that focus on public health was an important clarion call for our communities to all focus on the impact of public health, which is why very early on, one of the first decisions that Mayor Kelly made was to appoint the fantastic Dr. Mary Lambert to lead our inaugural Office of Community Health, who has decades of public health experience and is truly we're very, very lucky to have her. And since the beginning of this administration, we've seen our vaccination rates across the county move from about 40% to 56% of people who are fully vaccinated. It's not high enough yet, but we have made progress. But we also see lower rates amongst our African American community, where we have seen an increase from 29% to around 40%. And this is thanks to so many partners all across the community, from Clinica Medicos to SIMPA to the Hamilton County Health Department. This has been a whole of community effort, but it has been a huge opportunity for us to talk about the ways that health shows up in our community. And it's not just physical health. The mayor wanted to have an office that really specifically focused on a health lens to big challenges like gun violence, which has similar behaviors to an epidemic. And it's why Dr. Mary Lambert and our newly appointed and sworn-in police chief, Celeste Murphy, will be working very closely together to reduce gun violence in our communities. Because it's not just an enforcement challenge, although that's an important part of it, and we'll continue to do that excellently under Chief Murphy's leadership, but it also has to happen, solutions to this challenge have to also be in other departments of the city, and Mayor Kelly recognized that. This is an office that also prioritizes and elevates the importance of mental health in our community, and really making sure that folks in our community centers and in our schools have access to the resources and professionals they need to take care and focus on their mental health. And then finally, this office is fundamentally about reducing the health disparities that we see in our community. One of the most troubling things is that the second to worst census tract for health outcomes in our community is in Alton Park. And it's just a mile away or less, just up the road, from the very best health outcome in our community, which is on Lookout Mountain. And those disparities in our state and can be felt so locally and so close together. And I think that that's one of the areas where, because we have health and nurse navigators in our community centers today providing healthcare services, which is essential in trusted community spaces, we'll be able to really tackle that. It was exciting to see in President Biden's State of the Union where he touched on the fact that we need to get more healthcare in trusted community spaces out of doctors' offices and into community spaces, and that's something that Chattanooga had started to do months earlier. So that's really exciting.
Yeah. So for me, seeing Mayor Kelly create the Office of Community Health has been personal for me. When we talk about COVID-19 and seeing just the increase in the vaccination rates, every percentage point of increase means a life that's saved. A friend of mine, me and a friend were talking the other day, and I've got 4 or 5 people that I knew growing up that are all under the age of 45, all African American, and they are now all dead from COVID-19. And when you think about the scale of death in our community and across the world from this virus, it has a staggering effect. And so as you think about that, and I don't know whether or not they had health disparities, but whether our Office of Community Health is helping to really work with the health department to push the narrative out for more people to get vaccinated against COVID-19, or really addressing long-standing health disparities in our communities, all of that is good work that needs to happen across our city.
And the last goal that outlines in the plan is, effective and responsive local government. In some ways, this is goal 7, but in most ways, this is goal 0. It's a fundamental and foundational element of Mayor Kelly's focus on making sure that the city of Chattanooga runs effectively as a well-managed organization. We don't do this alone. This is not an organization that is just the department heads and the mayor's office, but rather we're an organization that serves residents that's 2,600 people strong. We're the 9th largest employer in the region. And from crew worker 1 all the way up, we know that there needs to be a commitment to service and excellence, that you see these values reflected deep into the department. So that's something that we've got an entire fantastic operations team working on. Our COO, Ryan Ewalt, and our Deputy Chief Operating Officer, Julia Bursch, and their team are really working with departments each and every day in public works, community development, and other operational departments, the fire department, to really live and breathe this One Chattanooga vision in their teams. And I think Mayor Kelly's one of his strongest perspectives is that we have to have a customer service-oriented approach to local government, and I think that is showing up in the way that people are able to engage and interact with the city of Chattanooga.
Yeah, as the mayor says, if we can't help people with the small problems, how are they going to trust us with the big ones?
That's right. So. And whenever we say that we're going to go create a universal path to early learning, you've got to believe us whenever we are saying we're going to get your potholes filled. So that is going to continue to be a focus for the administration. So that kind of wraps us up on the One Chattanooga plan. Thank you so much, Jermaine, for being here and talking through this with me. And thanks to all of you for listening and helping in many ways contribute to this plan. Over a year of campaigning, plus a year in office, we do have a sense of what this community is facing in terms of its challenges and also what the path forward is. It's really exciting, and thank you all so much. And thank you, Jermaine.
Thank you, Jetta.
Next, thank you. So before we get to our next speaker, I want to highlight a partnership that the city of Chattanooga and our friends over at the Enterprise Center have embarked upon called Chattamatters. And this is part of the way that Mayor Kelly is reinventing the way that the city of Chattanooga engages with its residents. And, before I get into a detailed explanation of what it is, I think it may be easier to just show you a video.
Why is rent so high in Chattanooga?
Why is homelessness on the rise?
80% increase in our unsheltered population in 1 year alone.
Why do we have a city mayor and a county mayor?
How do I ride the bus? Does everything I put in my bin actually get recycled?
One of the trucks that we audited was 30% contaminated.
What's that new coffee spot on Glass Street?
I just know that my grandmother saw something in this place, and not just this building, but other buildings as well on Glass Street.
Let's explore what really matters in our community.
Welcome to the new series, Chattamatters.
We ask the most basic and most complex questions about living in Chattanooga.
Follow us on social media and at chattamatters.com.
So I'm going to do something that normally we encourage you not to do at presentations like this. Get out your phones right now. I'm going to wait for just a second. And fire up your favorite social media platform and go to Chattamatters and give them a follow. This is going to be one of the ways that Mayor Kelly is working with our community partners to help explain the complexities of local government. And this is exciting because I think oftentimes for residents, the basic issues that affect them every day go into very complex institutions that don't make very much sense. And so for whether it's city council and the agenda setting process, or how our sewer system works, or whether or not recycling how recycling works and how things get from the bin to a sorting machine, all of those are questions that Chattamatters will be exploring, and we'll hope you'll join along the process. And so The next thing I'm going to do is encourage you, once you follow Chatham Matters, is to not check your emails because we've got a very exciting speaker, and I'm really proud to be able to bring him onto the stage. Our next speaker has served as a state senator and member of the United States House of Representatives in a career defined by applying data and community engagement to solve our country's most persistent problems. After graduating from Columbia Law School with honors, he was elected to the Utah State Senate in 2009, and in 2012 was elected as mayor of Salt Lake County, which is around about 1 million people living in that county. He was known there as a bipartisan collaborator who took on tough issues like homelessness and housing density. Before being elected to serve Utah's 4th Congressional District in 2018, he developed a national reputation as a leader in evidence-based decision-making and data analysis as part of his work to build partnerships between the private sector and government. As a member of Congress, he founded the bipartisan What Works Caucus to advance evidence-based policy and data-driven decision-making at the federal level. Today, he serves as a senior fellow with the Sorensen Impact Center at the University of Utah's School of Business, where he works with data scientists and policy experts to design solutions that make communities better. So please join me in giving a very warm Chattanooga welcome to former Congressman and Mayor Ben McAdams.
All right, thank you. Sit down. Well, welcome, Chattanooga. So great to be with you today. Thank you to Mayor Kelly for the invitation. I have to tell you, local government, having served at really all levels of government, I worked in city government, I worked in the state senate, as Joda mentioned, and then as county mayor, county executive, and then the United States Congress. But local government is where it's at. So you're all lucky to be here, to be part of this. This is where you can have an impact and really shape our communities for the better. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the work that I did when I was mayor relating to our assets and putting assets in local government to work. Millions of people in the sharing economy around the world have discovered how to make money right in their backyard, in their own homes, from resources they rent out. Whether it's renting out a spare bedroom on Airbnb, for example, and earning cash that helps to pay for groceries or gas or any number of other needs. In fact, my daughter just started renting out her car when she's not using it on an app that competes with major car rental companies like Hertz and Enterprise. So I know in local government that's oftentimes much to our chagrin because that is our revenue right there, and it's disrupting and changing how we run our communities. But millions of people around the world are making bringing in spare income from some of these assets that they own. Meanwhile, local governments in the U.S. have at their fingertips a wealth of real estate assets that are underutilized. These are dormant parking lots, they're empty plots of land, vacant buildings in quiet parts of town, and much more. What could happen if governments made better use of those assets? What if governments could generate revenue from those assets without giving up ownership? And they could use that new money earned without raising taxes on a single person and return it to the local community in the form of concrete benefits for our residents. Imagine solving our housing crisis. Imagine playgrounds that young children could play on. Imagine the veterans who are struggling with addiction who could exit street life and enter evidence-based recovery and earn a paycheck. Imagine new public bus routes connecting a neighborhood to areas of town that are hiring. Imagine filling all those potholes. Imagine the political gridlock that could be avoided. So under various names, this approach has been piloted in several cities across the world already, notably in Hong Kong, Singapore, Hamburg, Germany, Copenhagen, Denmark, and it's been done with great success. With the stale impasse of tremendous social needs that we are seeing in our communities, and our needs are growing, and strained budgets that are deepening, the time is right to explore this approach in the U.S. At a simplified high level, what I'm talking about is this concept is very straightforward. Government leaders would identify a budgetary goal, including infrastructure investment or homeless services or social or environmental benefits that are needed or other community benefits that you want to fund with additional revenue. Then, in partnership with experts who specialize in this work, government will inventory all of your publicly owned assets within the jurisdiction. Typically, the value of publicly owned assets far exceeds estimates. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we found when I did this work. it was shocking what we learned. And they are usually developed when we look at the cost of the actual value of our assets. It's developed using historical cost of purchase, not current market value. So you inventory these assets, and then you identify one or more of those assets that are underutilized and can be developed to their highest and best use within the parameters that are set by policymakers. You would use internal and external expertise to improve and manage and maintain those assets, and you will recognize additional value and revenue that's created and transferred to the public in form of concrete benefits, the benefits that you've identified for your community in the first step. And throughout this whole process, government would provide oversight and to make sure that it's done properly. So I want to show you here, if I can get this slide to advance. There we go. No? There we go. Talk to you a little bit about public asset valuation and this idea that we are looking at and modeling here in the United States. And so first of all, as I said, you would look at your problems. What problems do you want to address? Affordable housing, economic growth, income inequality, racial equity, aging infrastructure, parks and open space. What we know about all of these is it's going to take investment to move the needle and to improve the situation that we have, the challenges we're facing. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we start by understanding what we own, we leverage it, and we value it. So this initiative, this public asset yield initiative that we're talking about, first of all, you understand that your assets have different characteristics and different values that you're going to look at when you're evaluating these assets. And so we classify assets, first of all, as you have legacy assets. These are pristine natural spaces and open spaces that you want to keep in a natural state, or historic buildings like this one that you want to preserve in its natural and current state. So some of these legacy assets, the goal is not to maximize the return on investment, but it's to preserve them for a community benefit. The other type of asset that you would look at would be policy assets. So policy assets are the fire station or the police station, a library, things that serve a community purpose, but also your goal is not to maximize the highest and best return on this asset, but it's to serve some other community function. And then we'll talk about yield assets. So these are assets that have no policy objective, no legacy objective, but the purpose of this might be to just return the maximum benefit to the taxpayer, to the government entity, that then can be repurposed in the form of investments into community needs. So right here what we've got is a slide that shows, I was mayor in Salt Lake, Utah, and this is a block, an 8.7 acre piece of land right on the outskirts of our downtown. And this was where, up until about 15 years ago, Salt Lake City had its fleet. So auto repair, other facilities to maintain and service the fleet. As the city grew, we outgrew this site and located the fleet to a new location. And so now this block sits, 8.7 acre of land that is highly valuable. Across the street as this area is developing, you have a multifamily infill parcel that is valued at roughly $10 million an acre. So if you were to do nothing more than to simply move that type of development across the street to the former fleet block, you can see that you could add significant value to the area and bring property onto the tax rolls that can then turn around and form an investment into our community. So the fourth category of assets that I would like you to think about is, we talked about legacy assets, policy assets, yield assets, and then hybrid. Not every asset has to fit neatly into one category. We are looking at a library that has been in a location for 70 years. It's now surrounded by mass transit. It's surrounded by 8-story market rate development, incredibly valuable piece of land, and the library is not needs significant investment to continue to serve its function. So we're looking at and saying, look, we need a library, but could we take this library and stack it with housing or other types of market development that then can subsidize our library and offset the cost of building a new library? So hybrid assets that they can meet multiple functions. Here we have a school. This is a school in Copacabana, Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And they were struggling with figuring out, this school also, like that library, needed investment. They were trying to figure out how they were going to, where they were going to come up with the revenue to build a new school in this beach. And then in this beach town in Rio, and they step back and look at it, and you can see here significant opportunity if they just take a step back and look at their assets and figure out how they use their assets to maximize the benefit to serve a policy function of providing a school, and yet do it in a fiscally responsible way to the taxpayer. So I want to walk you through, we did this analysis when I was mayor in Salt Lake. We started with, this is Salt Lake County. I was the county mayor. I have a close relationship with our city mayor, but we have 20 cities within the county. So we looked at Salt Lake County and said, let's do an analysis of our property. So we looked not only at county-owned property, but all government-owned assets within Salt Lake County. So all city-owned, school district, and we even looked at some transit authority and some state property. So what you have right here, this is a map. We started at a high level. This is the value per acre of the land in Salt Lake County, Utah. So you see the heat, it's a heat map. When you get to the red, that's our downtown. So of course the more dense the property is, the more dense the development is, the greater value per acre. So you can see up on the north end, high value areas, and just some of the hot spots around Salt Lake where we have high value land. Then we mapped it in a 3D, so you can see these spikes of where our real opportunity and land value is. I don't have the slides included here, but we looked at our transit network, and really surrounding our light rail network and transit is where you have a lot of this higher value going throughout the county. And within a 10-minute walk shed of our transit is a lot of the areas that we're focusing on of publicly owned lands that have incredible potential. So what we have here is then we mapped the publicly owned, and this was an extensive process. We derived it really from our GIS system, and our county assessor has records, and so we started looking at properties that were non-taxable, and then finding those properties that were government-owned, non-taxable, and working through them here. And so what you see, we have two. So the light yellow, I think the legend is wrong, so I apologize, but the light yellow is our privately owned land. The dark yellow is publicly owned, but land that we've deemed just isn't commercially viable. So on the right-hand side is our watershed. That's where our Forest Service lands. It's our watershed. It's pristine backcountry that really we want to keep it in its current state. So the filtered public is that land that's publicly owned, but not anything we're looking to create a return on. The big block on the top is our airport. There's not a lot you can do with a runway, for example, that it's publicly owned, but it's just going to stay in its current state. But what you've got in the blue are publicly owned parcels that have commercial value. So as we mapped that, what we found is we had 44 square miles of commercially viable, publicly owned land that was at least worth further analysis, whether it was underutilized or whether we wanted to then take a closer look and to see how that land was being used. So when we looked at that land also had I can't read it there, but 2 square miles of buildings on 44 square miles of land. So we're starting to peel the onion here and look at it more closely. We're starting to see that there might be some real opportunity with this land. Going back to that fleet block, that was a key example that rose to the top. Now, we knew about that parcel. That wasn't what we stumbled across it. We knew about it. We knew that it had value. We've been working for some time to bring it forward and bring it to the private sector. Whether we sell it, right now the city's looking at selling it or holding it, or what do they do with it. They're trying to figure that out. There's time value and money. So the fact that it's taken us 15 years to figure this out illustrates to some extent what we've left on the table. Now, I think we're lucky that property values in Salt Lake City, like many of our cities around the country, have increased over time. So it's not a total loss, but there's certainly a lost opportunity in tax revenue and return that the city could have received from that. So we looked at a few other examples that I wanted to talk about. So this is a high school. My kids actually went to this high school, and there's a lot of opportunities surrounding this high school. It's also a historic high school, almost 100 years old. It's in a part of our city that is now really as the downtown has grown. It is part of our downtown. And you have this across the street, just north of the high school, this driver's education course. In an area where you looked at the private sector development, $16 million an acre just across the street. So we looked at this driver's education course, and it could create essentially $29 million in market value. There are approximately 224 parking spaces there as well. As we calculated this, you could, I think the next slide shows this. Let me see. Yeah, so we're spending about $128,000 per parking stall for students at this high school. So we could build a 3-story parking structure with one story being underground, and put our driver's ed course on the top of this parking structure, and do it for the same that we're doing right now. So clearly there's some land here that can be, it serves a small policy function of providing parking for kids at the high school. There actually is a driver's education course about a half a mile away that they could also use, and look at this land as an opportunity to benefit the school district, to benefit programs in the school, to benefit students in the school. There's a lot that could happen here if we take a step back and look at our assets and how they're being used. So this is, I think, the Salt Lake City equivalent of that school in Rio. We can find the same purpose and meet the same policy function and generate opportunities for our community. So we do the math here. Let's look at here's the value of Salt Lake County. First of all, we looked at the value of those assets. When we looked at those blue assets all across the map and what they were worth, what we saw then, we didn't know what they were worth because they were non-taxable properties, so the county assessor really wasn't doing appraisals and looking to figure out what this was because it didn't matter. We weren't collecting taxes off it anyway. So oftentimes they were logged in our system at their book value. We acquired them, the parcel 100 years ago for $10, so we just didn't know what it was worth. But we looked at what, that parking lot, let's say, as vacant land, that underutilized parking lot across the street had vacant land that just sold for X million of dollars. So we started figuring out what our land was worth in its current state. And what we came to was we had about $10 billion worth of land. So to put that into perspective, my budget when I was Salt Lake County mayor was roughly $1 billion per year. So we had a 10x of our budget. It was the value of government-owned real estate within the county. So then a few more, like let's say we were to rehabilitate some of these structures, do just minimal and fix them up and sell it. We calculated it would be worth about $18 billion. So that would do a lot. That would solve our affordable housing crisis. We could fully fund all of the services for homeless services. We could fully fund all of our road needs and then lower taxes, right? We looked at if we were to take these 44 acres of land and do just single-family development on these land. We're getting creative. Obviously, not all these parcels are going to be a good fit for single-family, and you can't develop 100% of the parcel. But just trying to do some of the math to figure out what this would look like. If we did single-family development on all of these parcels at typical density, it would be worth $51 billion. Then if we looked at extreme, if we were pushing the limits to try and be most creative and most aggressive about the type of use that we put towards these land, we felt that it could be worth $104 billion. So then what we kind of settled on is maybe a more conservative approach. Some of it might be single family, some of it might be open space. We might take a parcel where density is appropriate and say instead of doing market rate housing, we want to do 20 or 30% of it is going to be affordable housing, and the rest can be market rate. So some mixed income housing, or maybe we're going to have a library in the mix there in addition to some market rate and affordable housing. So trying to take some more modest assumptions about what it would be. And the number we came up with that we think is pretty conservative is we have the potential of creating $45 billion of benefit for our community, and that's a lot. With a county budget, but there are also 20 cities that I mentioned in that, but it is several multiples of the current government expenditure could be created from better utilization of our lands. So thinking about this we're not going to go, as a mayor. So I did this. I was mayor, and it was 2017 when we were doing this work, and I'm thinking, okay, we have incredible opportunity here. How are we going to leverage and create value from this opportunity? And never, I see we have some of the city council members here. Never in my mind could I conceive that I would convince the city council or my county council to sell $44 billion worth of land. What does that council meeting look like? It just doesn't happen, right? Obviously, the problem and the challenge is much more three-dimensional and complicated than that. So how do we get from the concept that there's incredible value to implementing that value? And starting to recognize a return on that. So I did a little bit more just back of the envelope math to say you're never going to get 100%, right? We're never going to get 44 square miles into active management and revenue generation. But let's say we got a third of it. Let's say we could get $15 billion of opportunity into active management and creating a return for our community. And let's say because we decided to put libraries and schools and housing affordability and try to, so we maybe decided we're not going to be the most aggressive. We also have some policy goals that we want to achieve with this. So let's say we, off that $45 billion, we get $15 billion into active management, and we are generating a 3% return, which is pretty modest. If you were a private sector asset manager generating a 3% return, you wouldn't have a job. But our goal would be to satisfy some other policy objectives and be more modest in our calculations. At a 3% return, we're talking about new revenue without raising taxes on a single person, roughly equal to $500 million a year. What could Chattanooga do with $500 million a year? I thought about the things that I wanted to accomplish. I had an early childhood education initiative. We had air quality. We have some air quality concerns, so some clean energy, affordable housing, certainly homeless services challenges, roads. We didn't have, we're going to see some funding coming from the federal infrastructure bill, but our roads we don't have enough money to maintain our roads, let alone build new bridges. But with $500 million a year, I could do all of that and then lower taxes significantly. $500 million a year is more than we brought in from property taxes, more than we brought in from sales tax. So incredible opportunity. So where do we go from here? We get to the point where we say we've got incredible opportunity. So current assessed value of the county was $131 billion. Adding $45 billion, again, it's just to show that it will materially impact our community for the better. So where do we go from there? I actually in 2018 decided to run for Congress. And again, so when I say that local government is the best place to be, I'm speaking from experience. Having seen it at every level, you're so lucky to be involved at the local level. I ran for Congress in 2018, and I actually won. It was the closest race in the country, and I won by 694 votes. But who's counting? I was talking to Joda about it this morning, and Joda said you had to be in recount territory. I actually avoided a recount by 11 votes out of almost 500,000 votes cast. So it was a very close race. So no surprise that in 2020 the political climate wasn't quite so good. So no choice of my own, found myself back in the private sector after the election in 2020. So I was thinking, okay, as I'm leaving Congress, lost an election, wanting to going back into the private sector, but looking for something that can. I have this love and passion for public service, and was looking for opportunities to continue to give public service, to make a living and to make a difference. And so I thought about this public asset work that we were doing when I was mayor, and I wanted to check in on it, how it was going, where it had progressed since I left. And so I called up my former employees at Salt Lake County and just was asking them for an update on it. And they said, well, certainly the culture of recognizing the value of our assets and utilizing those assets is something that had permeated throughout Salt Lake County. They wanted to do it. They said the first thing, as is natural when there's a transition from one mayor to another mayor, some things got slowed down. Now, my successor is a good friend of mine, fantastic public servant, But things got slowed down, and so they slowed down, and then COVID hit. And as you know, probably personally and firsthand experience, that has been an all-consuming effort, starting in 2020 when the pandemic began, and continuing to a great degree even today. So they said that also slowed it down and it made it so they weren't quite able to implement it. But then the third thing really caught my attention. They said the other problem is we have in our budget to hire somebody to actually be the point person to do exactly this. The challenge is our salaries are $20,000 under market, and we can't get anybody to apply for the job. So, I, as someone who spent 15 years in government and love government and know the potential of public service and admire public servants who are willing to make so many sacrifices to do the community, to serve our communities, that is such a government response, right? That we believe in the $45 billion of potential. We want to unlock that, but we just can't raise salary by $20,000 to make it happen, to hire an employee to make it happen. So to me that said, okay, there's clearly potential here. We're bought in. We know that this is something that can be done for the benefit of our community, but the structure, we haven't quite figured out the structure how to do that. So what I'm doing right now and what I'm here to talk to you about is how do we, first of all, as I showed in that first slide, understand the value of your assets, map them and know what you have, and then figure out the structure that helps to systematize and operationalize the professional management of public assets for the benefit of our communities. And I mentioned that this is not new. This is something that's been done successfully in major cities in Europe and Asia, but it hasn't really been done here in the U.S. Now, you can think of examples of, I talked about that fleet block. Now, without an initiative, that fleet block, we're going to figure it out. We're going to get it into some type of private sector development that's going to create a return back to the community, whether that's because they sell it or they do a long-term land lease or they do a joint venture and they receive some ongoing benefit from it. All of those things are possible. But what we're talking about here isn't those isolated examples, but it's talking about every single parcel of government-owned assets, giving a mentality where those assets are used, managed professionally to create a return for your community. That needs to be the expectation, not the exception. And there is an example, actually, of where this has been done successfully in the United States, not in the area of real estate, but think about our public employee pensions. Now, we take assets by taking a percentage of our public employees' paychecks, and we put that into a pension fund. And what we do with those is we don't take those dollars and then put them under a mattress or put them in a vault or put them in a savings account to save to pay out eventually when that employee retires. We give it to a professional manager who is charged with investing those assets and creating a return on investment. And they are judged based on their ability to create a return on investment. We don't say these assets came from the Parks and Rec department, and so we're going to have the Parks and Recs director decide how to invest those assets. We don't say, we're going to have the city manager maybe decide how to invest those assets. We don't say, look, this is a great investment. We'll put some money here and leave the rest of it unmanaged. We have professional, systematized, operationalized asset management to create a return on investment of those pension funds, and our employees expect it. So what we're talking about with this initiative, putting assets to work, is doing exactly that, creating the structure. First of all, understanding what you have and what it's worth and what that opportunity means for you as a community. What can you do with it? And then creating the structure that is probably a hybrid of both a government entity, and it probably involves some private sector collaboration and joint venture and partnership, that will take those assets, create the expectation that those assets exist to create a return and a benefit to your community and to your taxpayer, and systematize and incrementally start moving those assets into professional management. I know it's not going to happen in day one. It's not going to happen with a single city council vote. It's going to be incremental over time as you identify tier one assets that are prime for this You move those in and put them into management. You create a return on that the community sees as a benefit, and then you move towards maybe a tier 2 asset that's a little more difficult, and you just incrementally will move to scale those assets to create a benefit for your community. I believe that there is incredible opportunity not only in Salt Lake City, but in Chattanooga and in the countries across the United States. And as government finance is upset and revolutionized and disrupted with changes in shopping and land use and people working from home and the sharing economy, we have to innovate alongside them, and we have the potential and opportunity to do that. Thank you.
So we are going to go ahead and, after hearing from Ben and myself and Jermaine through this One Chattanooga strategy and hearing Ben explain and open up some possibilities for us as a community, we're going to take some audience questions, whether for Ben or for me and Jermaine. So our colleague Ellis is walking around with a microphone, and so just stick your hand up and we'll run a microphone over to you and try to answer any questions that you might have. Doesn't seem like a shy group.
I put him to sleep.
Yeah,
George does that.
That's true.
All right, well, there we go. As you guys are thinking about your questions, I think a lot of you who registered for this State of the City also did some questions online. We have a few, so I'll just start us off with a seed question here. What's the most important thing the city can do to better serve our fellow unhoused Chattanoogans? Yeah,
it's a great question. And, I know that the homelessness was a lot of the submitted questions that came up as you all RSVP'd, and I'll touch on a few of those. So the first thing is acknowledging that homelessness as a challenge starts with acknowledging that the problem is a lack of a home. And so Mayor Kelly's adopted a housing first approach, which means that we are working with our partners on City Council to identify opportunities to get as many people housed as possible. We've already housed hundreds of our homeless neighbors over the last year. And one of the challenges that we have is that we need more landlords willing to step up and be able to take housing first vouchers to house our homeless folks. But it's not just housing. We know that if we simply give folks, after many years of potentially being homeless, a key to an apartment and say good luck, that's not going to quite do it. We need to make sure that there are the supportive services, whether that be caseworkers or making sure that people have access to mental health resources, drug and addiction resources, those kinds of things, when they are housed. So as we are working on building out that supportive housing solution, which is a part of our broader housing challenges, we are and strategies, supportive housing will be a part of that. We are also going to be setting up some spaces where folks can get shelter and also have a managed campground to provide services. Folks aren't going to be able to bring weapons or alcohol or drugs in, and then that will be a graduated ladder where folks can then move from that sanctioned encampment onto more permanent housing. Any other questions? Either on the One Chattanooga strategy or for Ben.
All right, we've got one in the back, and while I'm walking over there, I'll also ask, how does a new mayor truly make changes when a majority of the people responsible to enact the changes have been in city government for quite some time? How does that work?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, and I think one of the things that our colleague Ryan Ewald, our Chief Operating Officer, has really been focused on is making sure that a comprehensive strategy around change isn't just about political appointees. Mayor Kelly did appoint a new bevy of leadership, but also we have fantastic, excellent public servants who make the city run every single day. And whether they be folks who pick up the trash or pick up brush, or they are the Head Start teachers that are educating the next generation of Chattanoogans, making sure that they have context for what the mayor is trying to do, making sure that the One Chattanooga plan is directly tied to the way that they are seeing themselves at work. So that's really how we're beginning to think about change within a broad 2,600-person strong organization.
And we've got Mark over here with a question. Mark, go ahead.
Mr. McAdams, you mentioned lower taxes. Have, since 2017 or whenever this program started, have your county been able to lower your taxes?
Well, thank you. That's a great question. So as I was starting to say, the initiative in Salt Lake County has stalled a little bit. They're looking to move it forward now, and they're actively looking at a few different opportunities to do this. I think in the early stages, if they can, of course, scale it and get to significant assets under management in this approach, then there's an opportunity to do a lot. But I think what they're looking at right now, so there's a library. I use that example because there's literally a library they're looking at that is 70 years old and needs significant investment if it's going to continue to function as a library. But it's surrounded now by transit, both a bus depot and a light rail stop, and 8-story private sector development around there. So they're looking at this and saying, we could raise taxes and build a new library, or we can rethink, like Rio did, rethink how we build this library and maybe get a library for free without raising taxes. So those are some of the stuff they're looking at right now. I think that is the incremental approach. It'll take a few small projects like that then unlock more, and so you'll have this incremental virtuous cycle where you continue to move these assets under management and create the benefits that's going to support the needs in the community and really give significant revenue to have options.
David's got a question.
Oh, hey there. This is really for Ben McAdams and the city. Really enjoyed the presentation. It sounds like even when you guys went through that process of looking at the assets, there were some surprises even to you all of what you had. So I'm curious, potentially for Chattanooga, like how can we as a community start to see what our assets are, right, along with the city as they go through that exercise. But then in the spirit of entrepreneurship, which you spoke to, Joda, it's like I'm curious a little bit for you all, how did you go about the ideation process of how to use those assets? And I'm also curious, from our city standpoint, if entrepreneurship is important, how can the community start to bring some ideas to how to use those assets? And how did you guys do that? And then maybe what is your advice to us as to like a community coming up with ways to use those assets?
Great. Well, I think the first step is to understand what you have, right? And so there are people who can work with you in that process to actually sift through your data. It's knowable because it's all in a GIS system or something. It's a matter of aggregating it, collating it, organizing it, then figuring out what's your untouchable, your filtered public, and what's your commercially viable public. That's an exercise that's doable, and I know Mayor Kelly's interested in having that data at his fingertips. And then you figure out what some of the opportunities are to then move it forward, and moving it then into implementation is the next trick. Now, every asset has, it's not easy. That fleet block that looks really easy has some environmental cleanup. It actually has some historic value that people want to capture some of the unique nature of this property and preserve some elements of it. So every parcel has some uniqueness and some trickiness that you've got to work through. What I think is important is having a structure that is not the person whose job is to cut grass in the parks and build new soccer fields isn't also having to think about how to maximize the utilization of this real estate. It has to be, I think, a unique and separate function within government where you have akin to your retirement system and your pension fund. You don't have your Parks and Rec director figuring out where the best place to put Parks and Rec pension funds. You have somebody who's solely tasked with doing that so that when a pandemic comes, our pension fund managers didn't take time off during COVID to manage a public health crisis. They continued managing our pension funds as stewards for the public employees who would need them in a future date. So I think there's some structuring that we need to think through and get the right structure that would fit for Chattanooga to enable you to then systematize, operationalize, and scale an initiative like that.
And then we do want to stay on time, so I think we can do one more question here. This is Morgan.
Mr. McAdams, I was just wondering, when you're doing your land valuations, how do you weigh the possibility of economic growth against protecting or even expanding your green infrastructure, particularly downtown, where you did have concerns about air quality and possibly urban heat island effect?
Exactly. Well, I think that is where Going back to the public pension analogy, right? So the idea is the managers of your pension fund, they're charged with maximizing value of that, but your policymakers can also set some policy guidelines. Best practices is to probably not tie your pension fund manager's hands, tie them to the minimal extent possible. But you've seen governments who will say, we don't want our pension funds invested in carbon investments, or they'll place other restrictions on it. You can do the same thing with your real estate. So we're talking with Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County, and they say we may want, even though this parcel is worth $5 million, we want whatever development comes here to have 20% of it be affordable housing. So that policy guidance will shape the value of the parcel and how you proceed. You could have, and then let's say the portion that is market rate is going to generate a return, and you may say we want to take our return from that market rate housing development and invest it in clean energy, and we want to invest it in homeless services. Or these are all decisions for elected policymakers and staff to decide. But I think you're right. We want to make sure that it's done in a sustainable way that has certain amounts of open space and green space and fits a community standard. And policymakers can engage in that as they're looking to move that asset. So it would kind of fall in the category of a hybrid asset, right? You do want to recognize some return and create value for the taxpayer, but you're going to have some policy objectives you want to achieve at the same time.
Thank you all. And we're going to take a brief intermission till 3:30, and then we're going to come right back because Mayor Kelly is going to have a conversation about the state of our city and really want you to come on back for that. So please give it up for Congressman Ben McAdams for being here, my colleague Jermaine, and thank you to all of you. Thank you. While he is well known to many of you, our host for this conversation is actually the way many of you start your day. He is the morning and noon anchor for News Channel 9. He was voted Best of the Best TV Personality by the readers of the Times Free Press, as well as Best TV Personality in Chattanooga Business Elite's Black Excellence Awards in 2021. He's been a reporter and an anchor across the South. Please join me in welcoming the one and only Greg Bundaberg.
Good evening. Good evening. Oh, you guys can do better than that. Good evening, or good afternoon, I should say. I've been up since 2:30 this morning, so I'm so excited to be here for this occasion. And so this is going to be fun. So we're going to have a good time, so sit back, relax, and we're going to have a great conversation. Mayor Tim Kelly was elected mayor of Chattanooga last year and took office 7 days after the election. He ran as a true independent, a localist, and entered office with a 100-day plan with an ambitious agenda. Prior to being elected, he founded and operated a number of businesses and served on the nonprofit and philanthropic boards across the city of Chattanooga. He is also very proudly a co-founder of the Chattanooga Football Club and was its chairman during its pivotal growth years. I am so excited this afternoon to host a candid conversation with him to reflect on his first year in office. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Chattanooga Mayor Tim Kelly. Good to see you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Wow, how's it feel?
Feels great. You know, a little surreal.
Surreal?
Slightly, yes, but it feels good.
You know, when you think about it, I remember you're in the campaign, then you go into a runoff. A week later, you're sworn into office.
Yes.
And here we are a year later. What has it been like for you?
You ever been in a blender? It's been exactly the sort of work that I love.
Okay.
It's been very fast paced. Obviously, coming out of COVID, it was very, very difficult to kind of get everybody back together and on the same page and start to affect this culture change. But I'm energized by the work. I really am. I love it, and I'm having a lot of fun.
So just like that, the first 100 days in office, the first year is a big milestone for you and your team. And while it's not possible to really condense a year into like a short conversation, I'm really curious how you view it now in hindsight from the 50,000 foot level, I should say.
That's a great question, Greg. It's sometimes it feels like a week, and sometimes it feels like 100 years. I will say, and I should have already said, I couldn't have done it without my lovely wife Jenny, who's been my sort of rock and supported me through the whole thing, and without council. And thank council for being here today. I'm blessed. I mean, I talked to a lot of mayors from all over the country and, in fact, around the world. And I can honestly say I don't know of another city where we have this great and harmonious a relationship. And we're blessed. I mean, Chattanooga is a special place. And so it could have been so much more contentious. So it's a strange feeling, but I'm sure we'll get into it a little later. But it's odd how sometimes it feels like a few days and sometimes it feels like an eternity.
You know, I'm sure it's been a whirlwind for you. What surprised you most going into office?
Oh, probably the size of the mayor's office. It's bigger than it needs to be. I don't mean the staff. Don't worry, guys. I mean, literally, physically, the office is pretty ridiculously large. So I'll probably be chopping that in half and giving the other half to somebody else at some point, but that costs money. So, no, I mean, that's kind of trivial. But, again, not so much surprise, but the volume of challenges that we face as a city is huge. At the same time, I feel incredibly fortunate to be in the office at this time when we have this influx of federal dollars. We're actually in good fiscal shape, and so I really feel blessed to be there with this council at a time when we can get some really important stuff done.
When you think about being in office for the past year, what are you most proud of?
Oh gosh, I would say I'm most proud, and it's been work, over the last year, getting positions filled. We've been able to attract some really fantastic talent. I think about Tamara Stewart, who's our Chief Equity Officer, or Scott Martin, who came from Louisville to run Parks and Rec. These people took pay cuts to come to work because they believe in our vision and the potential for Chattanooga. That's not a small thing. I mean, that's a big deal. They are bought in, and we've got a team that is really invested, and I'm very proud of that. I would say the proudest moment, which was the Ed Johnson Memorial unveiling, and I can't claim any credit for that. Full credit to Mayor Burke, my predecessor, and the full team that worked on that. But that was a very, very moving moment, and to be able to apologize to Ed Johnson and his family on behalf of the city of Chattanooga was a big deal, and I was quite proud of that.
When you think about the opportunities that you've been able to look at, what have you uncovered along this journey? And those that know me well have heard me say this many times. I can't say that I was, part of the gang during the last presidential election, but I did think Andrew Yang was asking a lot of, saying interesting things and asking interesting questions. And one of the things that he said was entrepreneurs hate wasted potential. And I consider myself to be sort of at heart an entrepreneur. And again, Chattanooga's got so much potential. I really believe it has the potential to be the best city in the United States. I mean, straight-faced. But, in terms of quality of life, all things considered. And so, I mean, that's my job is to lean into all these, things and try to spin as many plates as I can and get as much done in the relatively short time that I have to get it done. I mean, we're going to be adding a lot more jobs soon, a lot more announcements coming. We've got to address this affordable housing problem, but we can and we will. We're doing a ton more paving, as you heard from Joda and Jermaine. We tripled the paving budget, and we'll do that in each of the next 3 years. We're about to redo the website. We're going to be doing a lot more parks and green spaces, and we're going to very shortly be making a lot more progress with our homelessness. And switching gears today, right now, I would like to touch on a few of your major initiatives for a moment, at least the ones you've announced so far. By far, the biggest headline of your first year is the $100 million commitment to creating homes that Chattanoogans can afford. Can you talk us through your journey toward this particular decision?
Yes. Again, I've lived in Chattanooga other than 4 years in college in New York. I've lived here my entire life. And gosh, I mean, our median household home here, I think 7 years ago, cost $159,000. That number is now $290,000. And that's like an 80% increase. It's meteoric. And I heard, again, you can look at our homeless problem and see there's a direct relationship there. And then I heard a couple of anecdotal stories about absentee Airbnbs, and council was great about really picking up the ball and running with that. It's a crisis, right? I mean, I can work my butt off on economic development, but if we can't solve affordable housing, if rank and file Chattanoogans can't afford a place to live that's at or around 30% of their income, then the rest of it is for naught. So it is a hugely important problem, and I'm fortunate to have a great staff that knows a lot about policy and shares my sense of urgency. And so it's a significant commitment, and I think it will make a big dent in things in very short order.
So as you think through the different views on the creation of affordable housing, you pick somewhat of a hybrid approach. Some advocates think the government should build all the homes. Others think the private sector should do it all. So how did you find the right balance?
Well, look, I mean, I definitely don't think. I mean, I'm a business person by nature. I think you have to work with the market. And again, Chattanooga's got a great history of public-private partnerships. So a lot of it has to do with lowering the cost of capital and attracting developers and making it worth their while. Government can take longer-term risks with money. And so can philanthropy. And again, I was a former chairman of the Community Foundation. So what we're doing is working on building a model that will attract not only public but philanthropic and private capital to unlock all this but work with the market. I mean, government can't solve this on its own by a long shot.
So let's switch gears. I know we want to talk about infrastructure for a moment. You talked a great deal during your campaign about this. So where are we with the paving and the potholes.
I
remember you tweeted about this when you first got in office.
Yeah, it's boy howdy. I'll tell you what, that whole pothole thing, I had no idea that would be quite as effective and popular as it was. But and I've heard a lot like my pothole's still not filled, so nobody seems to care unless it's a pothole in front of their house. But coming into office, we were well behind. And again, we've committed $10 million this year and each of the next 3 years for paving, and so we're getting caught up in short order. And we are soon going to publish, I think, knock on wood, my staff's probably going to kill me because I don't think we're ready to announce it yet, but pretty soon we're going to put at least a tentative list of paving schedules up on the website so people can see when their road's going to be paved.
When you talk about infrastructure, what are some of the biggest challenges when it comes to infrastructure, especially bridges?
Well, we've got the Wilcox Bridge, which we literally can't or shouldn't be sending fire trucks across or heavy trucks. It's in such bad shape. And so, again, thanks to the Biden administration and the IIJA, the Infrastructure Act, and Norfolk Southern, we've got a deal to replace that bridge. We're talking about like an $80 million project. And we've got others, too. I mean, the Hamel Road crossing, we're working with TDOT and the Department of Transportation at the federal level to address a lot of those bigger infrastructure issues as well. So we're excited about that.
You've also said that Chattanooga's outdoor resources are really our greatest competitive advantage. What do you mean by that, and what does that truly mean for your administration?
I went back to business school late in life, and I had a strategy professor who would just kind of pound it into us. What can you do, your organization, and this is true of government or business, that another competitive organization can't or won't do or doesn't have and can't duplicate? Well, again, I think about that through the city lens, and folks, we are in a competition against other cities for talent and jobs, and our green spaces really are the thing that we have that other cities around the country, around the world, are very jealous of, and for good reason. So that's what we really need to emphasize. That's what we need to push forward, and that's what we will do.
We've heard a lot today about that cities can be successful when they look at underutilized resources and also leverage those in community partnerships. So to produce a greater benefit for the community, how do you think that can apply to our outdoor assets?
Well, let me just say this. First of all, thank Congressman and former Mayor Ben McAdams for being here. Let's give him another round of applause because he hopefully we will be able to participate in the incubator project that he's working on because we have a huge opportunity there, right? I mean, we are in the middle of a Parks Master Plan. And once that Parks Master Planning process is done, I think we'll have a better idea of what that will cost and what it will look like. But I think, as you heard from former Congressman McAdams, I mean, what you don't know, which again, Congressman McAdams probably doesn't know, is Chattanooga is sitting on a ton of surplus property as well. And so we will have very similar opportunities to what Salt Lake had, and we'll be looking to kind of solve that puzzle to create more green spaces.
So one thing I think that really resonated with many residents during your campaign last year was the commitment to education. Even though we know K-12 is funded and managed by the county, how do you see the city staying really plugged into the education process, and what are the opportunities there moving forward?
Well, I mean, my personal belief is that education is the single most important thing that we can do for our future. It is the thing that transforms people and takes them from poverty to wealth. I mean, that's it. It's that simple, right? As much as I wish the city were still in the education business, there's plenty that we can do. We can certainly do more around early childhood, and we will. We're very fortunate to have Caritza Mosley-Jones leading that effort, who is on the Hamilton County School Board. I don't know how many people realize that. So there's some synergy there. I'm very proud of our Community Forward Schools initiative, which pairs up a navigator with a principal in the Midtown District. And if that's successful after this first couple of years, maybe we expand that. But as I said during the campaign, I consider the schools in the city to be city schools. And so, look, we're always looking for ways to partner with the Hamilton County Department of Education and my good friend Mayor Coppinger and whoever his successor may be to support education in every way, shape, and form in the city.
So, one of the boldest commitments has been to catalyze economic vitality in the Black community. Yep. So if you can kind of talk us through what this really means to you and where that commitment truly came from?
Well, again, I spent a ton of time here. A lot of people know me as a business guy, but I came from a family of service, and I did a lot of nonprofit work here from the time I got back here in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and wound up, seeing Chattanooga through that lens in an increasingly broader scale. And particularly towards, just a few years ago, as a trustee at the Benwood Foundation and as a chairman of the Community Foundation, it became very, very clear to me that the gaps between black and white and rich and poor in Chattanooga were just grotesquely broad. And that if we were going to move forward as a community, not only for the benefit of the black community, but for the benefit of the entire community, we had to quit sweeping these problems on the rug and take a more proactive and aggressive approach to addressing them. And that's where it came from. I mean, I'm convinced that is what we need to do. Again, it's not solely for the benefit of the black community. That's the maybe unexpected part of this. We have got to solve it for the good of the whole community.
So I know it's a big goal, and it's also only been a year, but where do you feel like we are with the initiative and what's ahead?
Well, again, we're just at the beginning. This has kind of been a go slow to go fast thing. The first year has been somewhat frustrating, just getting the team in place, getting again, we haven't spent very much of our American Rescue Plan dollars because we formed an Equitable Recovery Commission, and they did a fantastic job helping us identify the priorities. So we're just now really firing up the machine and getting it in gear. And as we move forward, I expect to be doing a lot more around, support for entrepreneurs and small business people, particularly in the black community, and I'm particularly excited about that.
We're going to switch gears. So now I want to touch on the One Chattanooga strategy itself, which has 7 priority areas. The interesting thing is that as we talked about some of your big first-year initiatives, we've also inadvertently covered quite a bit of your One Chattanooga strategy already. So for the audience benefit today, I'll name them all and then we can dive into it a little bit more. Number 1, building a path to universal early learning, which we touched on earlier. Number 2, catalyzing the economic vitality in the black community. Number 3, ensuring accessible housing choices for all Chattanoogans. Number 4, improving our local infrastructure. Number 5, building a competitive regional economy. Number 6, closing the gaps in public health. And finally, number 7, ensuring responsive and effective local government. So when you think about this strategy, so you've been talking about this for quite some time, how did this strategy truly come about, and how should we as the public view this?
Well, again, back to my kind of nonprofit service, the basic thesis started then. I mean, that was a chance for me to really look at I always think of things in analogies. People that know me, I know I'm full of them. And it's a process of swimming upstream to root causes. It was my attempt to really look at what are the root causes that if we could solve would produce the most downstream benefit, right? And so a lot of that started in my foundation work. I talked to 1,000 people or more during the campaign. And so a lot of it was listening to them. And then, again, I have a very smart staff, Joda and others, who kind of helped me put that plan together. And, look, we beat it to death and put it in front of a lot of people. And, in fact, we gave the Equitable Recovery Commission the opportunity to rearrange it and rewrite it. And they said, no, we think you nailed it. And I think that was one of the things I'm most proud of. So it was a labor of love. But as I say, it's important to also understand the why, right? Dr. King didn't say, I have a plan. He said, I have a dream. And so the why here is One Chattanooga, is One Chattanooga that works for everybody. And the thing is, it's not song and dance. It is possible. We can close these gaps and achieve this and make Chattanooga the best city in America. So I'm really excited about it.
Every mayor always says they're going to really work on the economy. So you've talked about it a little bit differently than some of your predecessors. I've heard you use a 3-legged stool as a metaphor. So can you really walk us through all of that?
Yes. And this has been sort of a recent revelation. And it's just that, I did a couple of tours at the Chamber of Commerce before being mayor, and I understand economic development quite well, as a lot of my colleagues on council do. But it occurred to me, sometime during the course of this year, that there's no point in me turning the crank and bringing in all these jobs and all this economic development if we can't solve affordable housing, workforce development, and to a lesser extent, public transit, right? Because we've got to have people have got to be able to afford to live here, and people have to, be able to do the jobs. And so that is where we find ourselves more and more. These things are not completely separate. We have to solve them all in order for it to work as a whole.
You've also spoken at great length about the importance of transit and transportation to the economy. So I've heard you use the term economic driver to describe the airport, and Carter has come up with a lot as well. So what will transportation and transit look like in the future if you are successful?
Well, that's a great question, Greg. To be fair, I don't think anybody knows. But here's what's really exciting about Chattanooga. We sit in this incredible intersection of resources and time and space where we have EPB here, we have Volkswagen about to switch over to electric car production on a scale equal to Tesla. Okay, I mean they're only number 2 to Tesla in electric production now, and we have the new Novonix plant. We have Oak Ridge National Labs up the road, and our fiber network means that we can do incredible things with automation. So I think the future of transportation, whatever it will be, may be sort of born first here. So we're going to be looking to partner with the community and with CARTA to figure out what that looks like. But that's one of those, to use a tired old analogy, we're really going to have to think outside the box and get it right.
So during your campaign, you spoke a lot about the late Chris Ramsey and how he truly inspired you to think differently when it comes to public health. So how has that driven policymaking at the city around the gaps when it comes to public health?
Well, his unfortunate passing, and I mean, the man was, in retrospect, a saint. And he, for those that don't know, it was Chris that pointed out to me that it was, Lookout Mountain that was number 1 in the state for health outcomes, and Alton Park that was 599. And it was in that conversation with him, obviously before he passed away, that it occurred to me that we had to get into public health business. And again, we were very, very, very fortunate to get Dr. Mary Lambert to come on board as our Director of Community Health. And obviously we're not quite through COVID yet. I mean, hopefully we will get all the way through it soon when we get past all the rest of the little subvariants. But we were looking very forward to working with her to really expand the purview of what community health looks like, and using our Family Justice Center more completely. Part of that project is destigmatizing mental health and making Chattanooga the most mentally and emotionally healthy city in Tennessee, if not the United States. And I think you'll hear more about that.
When you think about public health also, COVID-19, you came in office during the height of the pandemic. So what was that like, navigating that world with your staff in the middle of a pandemic?
Not fun. I mean, of course, we ran a campaign during the pandemic as well. So it was... I guess I was fortunate that I didn't have anything to compare it with, and I'm used to crisis management. I've navigated some relatively large businesses through some relatively narrow, dire straits. And so I'm used to that. But it was more of the same, right? And it was tough. But thank goodness, better days are ahead, and we're on the good foot.
You talked a lot about bringing a sense of organizational management to city government. And as we look at the last priority, providing responsive and effective local government, that implies a lot of fixes under the hood. So talk a little bit about through the work that you've done that may not make the headlines and some of the work that still lies ahead.
Well, Joda mentioned him earlier, and he's maybe out there somewhere in the audience, but our COO, Ryan Ewalt, who may be I tell people all the time, I mean, I'm a politician now, but I'm not a political person. Ryan Ewalt may be the only person who's less political than me. But he is a fantastic addition to our staff. And as Joda mentioned, I mean, we have broken down our One Chattanooga plan into digestible pieces, and we are bound and determined to drive that vision down through every department in the city, so that they really understand the why. So that everybody in the city understands that they're here working for the greater good, and they should be damn proud of it, right? I mean, again, Chattanooga has this incredible potential in the city, and, it's my job, our job, with Ryan's help, to get everybody on the same page and get them pulling in the same direction. And so That is the job of a leader, and it is the magic of organizational management is getting the right people in the right slots and getting them moving in the right direction.
When you think about the job of the leader, you literally went, like I said earlier, campaign, 6 more weeks of campaigning. A week later, you're the mayor.
Yeah.
You know, when you think about all of the transition for you, have you had a moment to really sit back and just take it all in, or has it just been like a roller coaster ride and you're at the top and it's like whoop and you're gone?
I've taken some time off since I've been mayor. I think that's important to do. No good to other people if you can't take care of yourself. So I have had some days to sit and reflect, thank goodness, and it's been, it's a little surreal, honestly. And when we hit the 1-year mark here a few weeks back, it really hit home. But again, time has flown by in many respects, and the best is really yet to come.
You've spoken quite a bit about civic engagement, and it seems like even the state of the city itself has, reimagined to be more engaging. So why is this such an important point for you, and how are you really tackling it?
Well, I mean, this may seem a little lofty, but I believe it. And everybody out there knows, obviously, what we've been through as a country in the last few years and what you're seeing happen in the Ukraine right now. Democracy is under threat. Mm-hmm. If you look at the Chinese look at us and laugh, and they think you people are, idiots, that, what we need is technocratic autocracy. And, I mean, even the election we just had, the primary, I think we had, I don't know what the turnout was, but it was certainly well less than 50%. Mm-hmm. That's pitiful. Yeah. That's pitiful. And look, if we are going to not only save democracy, but make it work as though it should, we've got to get people re-engaged, and that's why Chatham Matters is so important. It's why rebuilding our website is so important. People have got to feel as though their input matters, that we hear them when they're saying things to us, and that we can solve their problems in relatively short order. So that's what gets me up in the morning, man. Is that project.
We've looked back and we've looked ahead. What excites you most about year 2?
Well, as I made reference to earlier, it is getting this behemoth that we have built and sort of repaired in the background, outside the eyes of everybody out there, getting it fired up and getting it rolling. Right? I mean, again, I'm frustrated that we haven't made more of a dent with homelessness, but we will. By the end of this month, we should have our sanctioned encampment ready. That's just one of the things. Again, we're rolling with paving. We've got the Parks Master Plan coming up. We've got a lot of great things that are going to be happening this year, tangible things that we'll be able to point to and be proud of. So, again, best is yet to come.
As we prepare to wrap up this afternoon, I was talking to a friend of mine. She says, "What are you doing today?" I said, "I'm hanging out with the mayor." Yeah. So I'm going to pull a Barbara Walters on you this afternoon. I have to pull a Barbara.
You got to do the accent if you're going to do that.
I know. Yeah. If you could be a tree, what kind of tree would you be, and why?
Wow, man. I love that. That's a really great question. I love questions like that. I could think of something really funny to say, but I would say a white oak.
Why?
Because I love white oak. I mean, I grew up in the woods, and this is not a very interesting answer, but white oaks are just super useful trees. They're beautiful. Mm-hmm. They provide food for all sorts of animals. They provide all the staves for the barrels that our Tennessee whiskey sits in, and then all the other whiskey in the world sits in. And so look, all I want to do really, my highest and best use is to be useful to the world. I think that's a lot of what any of us want to be. Mm-hmm. And so it is a beautiful and useful tree.
And finally, this afternoon, in closing, I've got to ask you, what is the state of the city as we are today?
The state of the city is strong, and the state of the city will be even stronger this year. So thank you. You should be proud of your city, and I promise you as your mayor, you will be even prouder of it in the days to come.
Mayor, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Again, give it up for Mayor Tim Kelly. Thank you so much for the conversation. And again, I just want to say thank you to the audience and everyone watching at home today for your commitment to our city. These are exactly the kinds of conversations that really help move our community forward. And I'm so proud to see so many people here who truly care about the city of Chattanooga. My final request this afternoon is for each of you in the audience, don't let this be the end of the conversation. I know, as Mayor Kelly has said today and his team, they're eager and they're so excited to hear from each of you. So reach out, talk to your neighbors, get involved. Again, thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.